Welcome to the Middle Ages, a podcast hosted by two women in midlife navigating the wild, liberating, and often hilarious realities of this chapter of life. With a mix of insight, irreverence, and real talk, they explore everything from changing bodies and shifting identities to evolving relationships, work, and purpose. Because midlife isn't a crisis, it's a whole new beginning.
Oh my gosh, we're back.
I know. I've missed you.
I miss you too.
Yeah.
How do we live so close to each other and we haven't even seen each other yet?
Well, you were away and then I was away and here we are. But we're going to get together tomorrow.
We are, because we need community and we need to be social as middle-aged women.
We certainly do. You know, for me, and I know for you too, it's easy to see work as the social, but I know because I'm craving it right now that I need beyond work social. I need more intimate social. And happy Halloween.
Thanks. I know I look scary.
Now, do you know? I love it.
wait, there's some other cute ones.
That's a good color for us. Yeah, that purple or blue is good, not the orange.
That's a good color. Okay, we'll do that one. There's also this one.
Yeah, that's good. Let's keep that one. All right.
It's a little busy, but
is everybody seeing what we're seeing? Are they seeing the background?
If they are watching the video of our feed.
Okay. And if you're not, if you're listening to this in the future, we've just played around with some Halloween backgrounds, which is really cool.
Because we're 12. That's right.
Yeah. Do you know what Halloween symbolizes?
Candy.
Besides candy and costumes.
If I understand. Yeah, you tell us, because I think I understand, but I'm not sure I'll get it right.
So it comes from various traditions. Celtic and Mexican has a strong connection to Halloween, and it's said to be the time of our lives where we have the thinnest veil between the physical realm, the physical world, and the spiritual realm, or the spiritual world. So it's a time where we have the capacity to, one, really be closest to our soul experience. You know, we have a yoga tradition, we call it Purusha, and Purusha is the unmanifested, the eternal. And then we have our personal experiences, Prakriti, which is our embodied form, that which is manifested. So this time of year is when that veil is the thinnest, the easiest to penetrate, which means it's a great opportunity to meditate, to do yoga, to do spiritual practice, and really have a chance to reconnect. And, you know, it's also for us in North America, it's the shoulder season, right? So we're sort of between that beautiful, like sunny fall and then the opportunity to ski and do winter thing. And we're just in like gross rain for the last several weeks and probably for the next 8 months. I say we have two seasons in Squamish. We have rain and we have pickleball season, and that's it for me.
You can play pickleball inside though, can't you?
If there isn't a municipal strike, but there has been a municipal strike, so everything's been closed, including, Steph, I know you're going to be really disappointed that you're not participating, but including my line dancing lessons were canceled.
Yeah, shoot.
No.
I was gonna come, but I will say, like, there's something about, I know we've talked about the seasons before, but there's something about the seasons that seems to be really important to my body. And I really hate the in-between seasons. Like I hate spring. Spring is my least favorite season, even though it's about renewing and rebirth. But here, spring is very much about wet, gray, gross. And then I do like the feeling of fall. I like the colors on the trees and stuff, but I don't super enjoy it because it tends to be really wet and gross. I really like it when we're either in summer or winter with snow, but I don't like the in-betweens.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love winter. Being from Montreal and then living in Ontario for so long, the winters were cold, but they're crisp and they're bright and they're full of snow and everything just looks like Narnia. It's so beautiful. And then I came here 4.5 years ago, and my first fall, September, until the whole year, June, it rained. I swear it rained every single day that first year. And I literally said so many days, like, what the fuck have I done? I don't like this. Well, fast forward now 4 years, and with the, just with the cycles of severe wildfires that are happening, and the importance of rain to keep Mother Earth moist and to keep our planet healthy. I actually appreciate it. And you and I both have dogs, so we can't get away from it. We have to go out and walk the dogs. So, it's all about what I believe at this time of year is it's all about the clothes. It's all about getting the rain gear and the Gore-Tex and the rain boots and trying to navigate as best as possible what we have no control over.
Yeah, I would say, like, I was born in Northern Ontario, and I actually really liked the winter, even though it was minus 50 and much snow. But last year here, we had 1 day of snow. And I would say that was probably my most miserable winter because we never had that transition into something different, right? Something on the polar end of the spectrum to feel like we had like done a cycle.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's talk about
speaking of cycles.
Speaking of cycles and Halloween and scary stuff tonight, the scary truths about the Middle Ages.
Yeah.
Let's dive into this. What, like, when we say scary, why is it scary? What's scary? Well, big, right? Big, overwhelming.
Yeah, and sometimes unspoken. No one ever really talked to me about what to expect at menopause. So when I went through perimenopause, but my doctor called it menopause. So I didn't even know perimenopause was a thing 15 years ago. She called me one day and said, my doctor, oh, Diana, we did some blood work and it came back and you're in menopause. I think what she meant was perimenopause because I still had a cycle. And I just kind of said, well, okay, thank you very much. But I have to say I had a relatively easy transition. I was younger. I was probably 44 when I got the phone call. And by the time I was 46, I was done. So I've been in menopause, which, I even had to research, like, what's the difference between perimenopause and menopause? And for those who don't know, perimenopause is when you're going through all the scary stuff, and menopause is when you're on the other side of it, essentially. And I had a relatively easy transition. I mean, I still had a lot of the ugly stuff, which we'll talk about, but I know there's so many people that have a different experience. And I'd love to hear your story, Steph, about your experience through perimenopause.
Yeah. I mean, we were just talking about this before we got on the episode. So this week I got diagnosed with diabetes, which is fine. I'm not surprised by it. I've had gestational diabetes. It's hereditary. I had always anticipated that I was actually going to end up in this place. So it's actually, like, weirdly, for many years, I have anticipated I would become diabetic. And I don't really know why, but just I had a pre-diabetic test before. I had gestational diabetes. My grandmother had diabetes. So along with that is, I'm working with a naturopath who is looking at everything really holistically. And part of this is all about hormones and, your insulin levels are affected by your hormones. And so she's looking at this too. And one of the things that I was going to do when I came home from our trip to Europe was I'm on hormonal birth control in order to deal with adenomyosis, which I have. And that's the treatment. So I came off of hormonal birth control to see what was actually happening in my body, because we don't know what my body's doing naturally. I'm a data nerd. I love to know my data. So I have a little at home hormone testing kit. So every day I can see what's happening with my hormones. And as of yesterday and today, the first couple of days of my cycle, I tested to be in postmenopausal levels with my hormones. So now we're on this journey to see, am I actually postmenopausal, or am I still in perimenopause? But, like, I have also had very little, to deal with in terms of that. I would say hair loss, and some of the, the body, I can't regulate my body temperature, but other than that, it's been pretty average. But I do think, like, in general, we don't get prepared for these things very well. I would say when I was trying to get pregnant, I didn't even know when I could get pregnant. I knew that there was a time of the month that I could get pregnant, but I thought as long as you weren't in your active cycle, you could get pregnant. I literally thought that because I'd never been taught. And then, I was in my 30s and I still didn't know. Right? So we don't get a lot of there is a lot of education now out about menopause because it's become a very popular thing to, and that's good. I see this as women starting to ask for what they need and ask for what they want, and that's great. But I would say until you're in it and you're seriously considering the effects of it, we don't know a lot. And so that when we don't know a lot, it becomes scary, right? So that's why I would say, one of the our first sort of big scary truth about the Middle Ages is that we're going to go through these unknown changes to our bodies that are going to happen for literally years.
Yeah.
And we don't know whether we're going to be on the extreme end of that or whether we're going to be like coasting through and okay. And we also don't know when it's going to end. And nobody has the information to help us. And when we go into the medical community to ask for help, we get dismissed.
Yes,
I got dismissed.
The community doesn't really know. They just say, yeah, that happens as you get older.
That's right. My doctor completely missed my diabetes diagnosis because she just said, oh, you're aging.
Yeah.
So this is what I think makes it scary, is that we don't have the support. We don't have I had to pay for fasting glucose tests because my doctor didn't believe that I needed them. So hundreds of dollars out of my pocket to get testing done. Mm-hmm. Thank God my naturopath caught it. But I think that makes this first health piece a scary truth, is that you have to advocate for yourself. You have to become an expert in your own body. You have to know everything that can possibly be happening to you. I bought a $400 hormone testing kit because I didn't want to be left in the dark. I didn't want to rely on people who may not have my best interests at hand, right? So this scary part is that we don't know enough and we don't get supported enough by the medical community, and that we may not have the money to seek the help out that we need. And so then we suffer.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally get it. My sister was recently diagnosed, my twin, with diabetes. And so everyone in my family, my mother, my father, and my 3 sisters, my parents have deceased, but they all had diabetes, and my sisters all have diabetes. So of course, when I found that out, I called my doctor and I said, can I make an appointment for just an annual checkup and some blood work? And they said, why, what's wrong? And I said, there's nothing wrong right now, but I want to be preventative and I want to look at some of these numbers so that we can track them and be on top of it. And they basically said, no. So I have to either make up an excuse. Now, for those of you listening that are not in Canada, we are so fortunate that we have universal health care, and we don't pay to go to the doctors, and we don't typically pay for tests that the doctor has recommended. And we have alternatives. We can see naturopaths. Sometimes benefits cover, sometimes they don't. Your health benefits through work. And so if my doctor, I'm going to call again, I'm going to advocate, and I'm going to, this is, I think, a really important lesson for all of us and in all of you listening, is no one is going to advocate as strongly as you are for your health. So if you feel you need something, if something doesn't feel right, if you need answers, push for support. Push for the medical practitioner, for the naturopath, do some research, try to find out what's happening with your body, because nobody is going to be sitting at a door waiting. Oh, I've been waiting for you to come and ask me all these questions. Right? We have to have some advocacy, self-advocacy.
Absolutely. Yep. And, data is your friend, information is your friend. You have to be able to put together all of the pieces on your own. Otherwise, you will not get the care that you need.
Yeah. All right. I have a list of things that I would consider things that no one told me about prior to going into perimenopause. And the number one, I think, scary fact that people need to know is during perimenopause, women can still get pregnant. Menopause marks the permanent end of fertility, but perimenopause, we can still get pregnant. And so, if you're changing whatever your protection is, know that you're putting yourself at risk. And I don't know, I certainly didn't want to have a child in my 50s. I had my son in 42, and that was it for me. So I think it's a really scary fact that women need to know. Just because they haven't had a cycle for a couple of months doesn't mean that they are in menopause or that they've ended their fertility journey.
Did you read the story about the woman in I'm going to get this wrong, but I think it was Poland.
Mm-hmm.
She's 65 and just had her 20th child.
Oh my goodness.
So the point here is that our bodies can do
Mhm.
all sorts of things, right? Our
There are
bodies,
exceptions. Mhm.
yeah, and making assumptions about whether or not those things can happen. I literally would be committed if I got pregnant right now.
I probably would be too. Life is just a little bit too full right now to have another child. I'm looking forward to grandchildren for the next phase of my life.
I'm good not having some for a very long time. Yeah.
The other thing,
I can go and take care of other people's babies. That's fine.
yeah. I work with children all the time, so I get my fill. What really surprised me was the extreme. For those of you who have not yet hit perimenopause and you're listening to this, the extreme of the hot flashes and night sweats. That is such a scary reality, and if you don't expect it, it's alarming. I don't know how you feel about it, Steph, but I felt like there was literally an internal thermostat in my body, an internal furnace that literally went from, I'm going to use Celsius, like, 7-10 degrees Celsius to like 40 degrees Celsius in a second. And it was literally like hot and then cold because I'm sweating and I'm clammy, hot and then cold. And so the extreme of it, I felt, was something that was really surprising. And I still can get night sweats occasionally, but it has more to do with my sleeping with like a heated blanket and 2 duvets.
That'll do it. Yeah, this crept up on me pretty quickly. I would say it's really the only sort of significant symptom I've had to deal with, but I cannot regulate my internal temperature. And I was always the person who slept with like 5 blankets because I was always cold. And now I'm like, I need my feet out from under the blankets. I open the window almost every night, and then I'm too cold and then I'm too hot. So, and sometimes I sweat so badly that I will sweat through 3 different changes of clothing in a night. And I'm not talking like, a little bit sweaty. I mean, like those clothes will drop on the ground with a thump. They're so wet. So I'm like, this is wild. Now, is it the worst thing ever? No, it's inconvenient and it's a bit annoying, but I'm trying to find the correlations. It tends to happen when I've exercised later in the day. And it's I think it's related to my hormones, right? Because that'll jack your hormones up. And there's also something called nocturnal hypoglycemia, and that will cause those kinds of sweats and to wake up in sweats like that too. So that might be related to the diabetes thing. But yeah, I will say that I wasn't prepared for, I think things just happen so quickly. That's one of the scariest parts, is that all of a sudden you're just dealing with something and now it's here.
Yeah. I will say that because I had been practicing at that point for about 15 years, hot yoga. So I actually put myself in, a 40-degree room with an added like 40% humidity. When the sweats came, I had a way of managing them. I still experience them as strongly as everybody else does, but I had learned how to practice non-attaching to the heat. So I notice it, I observe it, but I don't go like, this is awful, which a lot of people do. I've been in the presence of a lot of women at this stage of their lives, and I just would observe it. Oh, wow, my body's really hot. Oh, wow, my body's now okay. During the day. At nighttime, it was much more disruptive because sometimes I would literally have to change my sheets.
Oh, yeah.
For partners, like if your partner is a woman, you're very lucky because they will understand. If your partner is a man, they will not understand this. It's like, don't get too close to me. Oh, wait a second. Now come close. Wait a second. Don't touch me. And it's just our fluctuating body temperatures that we have no control over. It's nothing personal.
My partner's like, we love to be touching each other and intimate with each other. But then when we go to sleep, we're happy to just like turn our separate ways and go, and then, come back together when we wake up. But yeah, I don't want, even the cat likes to sleep on top of me, and I'm like, you gotta go away.
I have the cat on top of me and the dog leaning into me. And, I never thought I would ever understand having separate, like couples having separate beds, but I think I could kind of get it. I totally could get it. Like,
Yeah.
let's have a big bed that we can come together and, do our nightly rituals, but then like, let me sleep by myself. Yeah, I could totally get that. So the other
100%
thing,
get it.
speaking of sleep, is sleep disturbances. This is one of the scary things about perimenopause that people don't talk about. And insomnia and frequently waking up at night, whether it's due to the sweats or due to inability to fall back and stay asleep. And that can lead to, like, that makes life really hard when you're tired and you haven't slept well and you've got to function that the next day. It can make life really, really difficult to manage.
And it compounds, right? So it's not like I just had one night of shitty sleep. I have had to get really, 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 really good about my sleep hygiene. And I got a Whoop, which is like it's one of these, body metric things. And it's got a really, really robust sleep hygiene system in it. And I found that, like, if I was just following the recommendations, because it responds to all of your biometrics. So if I was following the recommendations, I actually got into a really good sleep routine. Like, the consistency is so important. And I go to bed at 10 o'clock. I'm asleep by 10 o'clock every night, and I wake up at 6. And that's what works for my body and my rhythm. When we were traveling, I got whacked out of rhythm. Like, I never adjusted when we were there. And then we came home, and the travel day home, I was up at 3 a.m. And then we had an 11-hour flight, and then another 5-hour flight, and 2 hours. And like, by the time I got home, my body didn't know what to do. Yeah. And it's taken me almost 2 weeks now to get to a point where I'm not waking up at 1 a.m. or 3 a.m. And it's so frustrating because you're awake and you just can't sleep. Right. And so then your whole world gets disrupted when I don't have sleep. I think that's one of the other big surprising things, is just how critical sleep is for me now. Yeah. And all of these things, like, I have to laugh at myself because I'm sort of sitting here thinking, oh, you're the curmudgeonly old grandma now who's like, oh, I need to get to sleep at whenever.
7
o'clock.
It's
actually true. It's actually true. I know. I texted you last night at, I don't know, 9:30 or 10 o'clock or something, and you answered me. And it's like, oh,
yeah. I go to bed at 7 or 8 because I love to get like under my heating blanket and I'll watch a show, or I don't usually do work at night. I'll just usually watch a show, or I'll connect with my son or my friends. So I'm in bed, but I'm not usually asleep till, 10, between 10 and 11, sometimes 9.
Here's one of my scary truths is
I take a nap at 7 o'clock at night though. Just a nap.
No.
I do.
One of the scary things for me, because I'm so dependent on this, is how much my brain has become mush. And I cannot do the evening work anymore. I come upstairs to sit at my desk, and my whole body goes, no, I can't. I need rest. I spent most of my life being like balls to the walls, always working, always going, always doing something. And it now I realize how much I need rest. And to me, that's a little bit scary because it feels like I'm losing productive time, but that's conditioning, right? And it's scary for me that my brain's not working the way it used to anymore. I cannot remember details. I cannot recall names. I could sit and stare at a spreadsheet for 5 hours, do tons of in-depth work with numbers. Now, the minute I shut it down, if you ask me anything about those details, I can't tell you.
Yeah. So,
and that feels like that's my livelihood, right?
Yeah, I totally get it. So I don't think that was an experience of mine I would say it wasn't an experience of perimenopause or menopause. My kids might say something different. But 2 weeks ago, I had COVID, and I've never had COVID where I had the brain fog component of it. And I totally understand. I would go upstairs and I'd forget what I was going upstairs for. Or sometimes I just felt like I was literally floating out of my body. It was the craziest thing. So the cognitive issues, difficulty concentrating, memory lapses, word retrieval difficulties, all of that is very real. Now, I also want to stress, the research shows that these are short-term symptoms. There are long-term symptoms of menopause, but these are typically short-term in that it should reverse a little bit as you finish perimenopause and find your way into menopause on the other side of that continuum.
I certainly hope so. The only other time I've felt that kind of chaos, like that kind of inability to access my cognitive functions was after I had a concussion, and you were there, you saw it.
Yeah,
Like I would stand there and stare at the wall and I would have no idea how to cope. Like I was moving at the time. And I remember you came in one day and I was like, it was all I could do to just put something in a box. And you were like, you know what? You need to go sit down.
I packed up your house for you. I watched you take 10 minutes to put one thing in a box. And then I saw you go to the sink. I don't know if you remember this, but you went to the sink and you were cleaning your sink for like 20 minutes, just cleaning your sink. And it was already clean. And I just thought, oh, Steph, okay, I'm a really good mover. Do you mind if I take over?
Between you, like I'm crying now, but you and Ryan, my ex-husband came, and between the two of you guys, you rallied. And to me, I have never had such an overwhelming sense of friendship. My love language is acts of service, because I have been so used to doing everything myself all my life. To have two people give me that much effort when I was struggling, like I don't think I realized it at the time, just how hard it was and how fucked up I was. But yeah, I could not deal with this move. I just couldn't. I would sit there and cry the whole time. Part of that was the emotional situation, but also I just couldn't get my brain to manage it, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So this cognitive stuff, I'll say why it's scary for me is that this is my livelihood. And if I can't function cognitively, I'm terrified.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So a little thing that I try to do a lot, because I also, I'm a single woman. I'm responsible for myself. Myself is always helping other people access their cognitive potential through their communication, through their self-regulation. And if I didn't have access to my cognitive, if I had an accident, if I had a concussion, if something happened, I had a stroke, I would be really done work. And there's nobody else that I can rely on to support me. So it is something I think about a lot of the time. But for those of you listening, so Steph said, I worry about it. Turn your worry to wonder. I've talked about this a few times on the podcast. Worry sends stress hormones through your body. Stress hormones deactivate your capacity to access your cognition. And so just little language shift, change your worry to wonder. You are so young, Steph. You are so vibrant. You're hilarious. And I don't ever experience you as not being able to come up with the language that you want to use. And I understand how sometimes it just feels like there's like a blank for a moment, right? For just a moment. And, and it is just a moment. The other thing that that's related that I think people don't talk about, and people who are in it now might not even realize it. So if you are in perimenopause, it is very common to have psychological challenges, anxiety, depression, mood swings. All of that is a very normal part of the hormonal fluctuations. You're not going crazy. You're irritable because these things are happening. And so the mental health support that you can find for yourself at this point is really important. It's not just about hormonal support, but mental health support to get you through this time.
And I think the biggest thing there is recognizing that this is not permanent, that this is very, like, I used to not, I've never had like PMS or anything like that. I never had any sort of effects of, and so I would always say, oh, I don't get affected by hormones. But actually, now I've always had really bad migraines, but now they don't follow the course of blood sugar issues. They follow the course of hormonal issues. And just acknowledging that some of these things are being caused by hormones, that there is no other explanation for them. And what that does is it says, I do want to get support for this right now, but I stay out of the narrative of there's something fundamentally wrong with me. Yeah. And I think that that's super important to remember as you're going through all this stuff, because then you can look at it as a point in time. You can get the support that you need at this point in time, but it doesn't create this whole other narrative that there's something you're going to be dealing with for the rest of your life.
Yeah. In Buddhism, we call it impermanence. This too will pass. This too shall pass, for sure.
And it's hard to get there and access that sort of presence of mind when you're in it, right? And that's the tricky part, is like, okay, great, Diana, it's great for you to tell me that I can just be, I could just think of it as impermanent, but it's real for me right now. So that's where we have to do the work to try and, get the help to get us to that place, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. The other thing that's common, and I remember, in my mid to late 40s, when I was going through perimenopause, I had a young child. And one of the things that we had in our backyard was a trampoline. Can you guess where I'm going with this?
Oh my God.
So it's very common in perimenopause to have urinary incontinence. And I would get on the trampoline and I would try to jump with my kids. And I had weakened pelvic floor muscles and I had thinning, we call it thinning urethral tissue. I could not go on the trampoline without leaking. So I gave up trampolining. Now I have tried recently, like maybe in the last 7 years or so, and I'm okay now. So it was definitely a temporary thing, but it is a real thing. And it is also a thing that can be impermanent. In other words, it's not going to last forever. Very likely. But I do encourage women to, the Kegels that we did when we were pregnant, get back to doing Kegels. You need to strengthen your pelvic floor muscles. And I teach this a lot in yoga as well, how to strengthen the pelvic floor muscles. We call it Uddiyana bandhas. Bandhas are locks. And it's really important so that this isn't a lifelong concern, because the pelvic floor muscles are going to continuously weaken, but you don't have to continuously have leakage.
My in-laws bought my kids a trampoline just after Hayden was born. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, that was the most used toy thing that they ever had. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to go jump on the trampoline. Parker, I think, was 2 or 3 or 4 or something. And I had to change my pants. Like I had to change my clothes.
Yeah.
So trampoline, laughing, sneezing.
Yeah, it doesn't happen anymore for me. So I'm really grateful, but I'm really, I do yoga all the time. And this bandha, this lock that we create, is essentially a Kegel. And it's like really pulling up from the pelvic floor and tightening. And it's so important to do that. And the other area that sometimes can be scary, and I haven't personally experienced it, and I don't think you have, Steph, but I've spoken to women who say that sex is really painful. Said they described it to me as it's like I have razor blades inside of me, and it really breaks my heart that could be so painful in such a beautiful, intimate act. And I'm going to say that for decades, the research has looked at men going through these phases of their lives, and Viagra has become highly prescribed and highly researched and refinedly developed. And women's painful sex was just, that's just what happens when you get older.
But this is with everything, right? Oh, don't even get me started on women's sexual health.
Yeah.
Because it's basically written off as not important.
That's it.
I was doing a bunch of reading on this actually the other day. I do not have this. In fact, I've got quite the opposite, but I was reading an article on these many women who are dealing with this, and some of the research that's out there now and some of the solutions that are in place now that are actually really helping with all of this. And it's all because, our body chemistry changes and we kind of get, some effects down there. But I think the bigger issue is that nobody talks about women's sexual health. And the thing is if it was happening to men, there would be funding, there would be, everybody there would be days off, right? And nobody in the medical community seems to think that women's sexual health is even important, right? So this is another area where we're going to have to start doing like a lot of work. I'm really happy to see that menopause has become now a buzzword. It's become something that a lot of people are talking about. There are people like Mary Claire Haver who are doing, are completely committed to creating lots of education and lots of understanding. And now it's very popular so women are starting to understand menopause better. They're starting to get a lot more resources around menopause. Now let's start talking about women's sexual health and that we deserve it, right? We deserve it. And what's the site that is now focused entirely on women's sexual health and also allowing women to have pleasure? Why
Mhm.
can't we, why is women having pleasure such a bad thing?
Well, it's just our conditioning, right? It's
It
just
is. Yeah.
conditioning. And so we're starting to change it by talking about it. That's the first step. What happens in perimenopause is as the estrogen levels decrease, the vaginal walls start to thin, they start to dry, they start to lose their elasticity, and it can make intercourse really painful. And I know that about 20 years ago, there was a big taboo on any hormone replacement therapy. And now there was one research that indicated it could lead to cancer, but now that's been reversed. I personally haven't been on any hormone replacement therapies, but I know for people who have the really painful intercourse, that hormone replacement therapy, and lots of coconut oil seems to be the medicine.
So I'm going to put a link in our chat here to my friend, my very good friend, Heather, who is such an amazing human being. She's a very, very credentialed OBGYN, and she is now doubling down, just focusing on menopause and the stigma around menopause. So this is the other side that I would like to talk about with menopause, is that these are not just physical changes.
Yeah.
There's a whole movement of people who are starting to talk about education around menopause for workplaces, not just this secret sort of like, oh, but there's so many reasons that people in a workplace environment don't talk about it, and men don't want to hear about it because they don't understand it, and it sounds like a woman's body issue. But my partner just had a woman come and talk to his entire company that he owns about menopause, just the whole company, and educating about menopause. And listen, if this was a condition that men went through, there would be all sorts of accommodations made and all sorts of things happening that, allowed women to still be able to work productively and respected the physical onslaught that these women are. Instead, we have to, just like we've always done, we have to come to work, we have to deal with it, we have to try and be productive, we have to try and, stay in the same mindset. And it's just, the accommodations, I think, can be really effective for women who are dealing with it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's some long-term effects too, unfortunately, that goes into menopause, and that's, I think, the scariest one. As I experience my life and the level of activity that I have in my life, the scariest one is osteoporosis, and just decreased bone density that makes us very at risk for fractures and breaks. And then the research on hip breaks over the ages, I think it's 65, maybe 60, breaking your hip can lead to ongoing physical difficulties, mental health difficulties, and premature death. And it's not that the fall, killed us. It's all the associated things with it. So keeping our bones healthy. And Steph, I know one of the best ways to do that, keeping your bones healthy and strong.
Powerlifting,
Weightlifting, strength training. You don't have to be in a gym to do it. I have weights at home. I do 50 not push-ups. I don't do push-ups because I have a shoulder issue, but I do 50 squats a day. And I always tell my friends, I don't do 50 squats because I want to have like toned glutes and legs. That's just the side product of it. I do 50 squats because I want to get off the toilet in 10 years or 20 years. I want to get on the floor and play with my grandchildren when they come around. So strength training, super important, whether you're using your body weight, whether you're using weights, whether you're going to a gym. It's not just enough to walk, although walking is great. It's not just enough to do yoga, although yoga is fantastic. Strength training becomes even more important here to try to slow down osteoporosis.
And I think, there's a much bigger conversation here around being active and activity and all of this sort of thing, because when I'm active and when I am, working out and when I am getting my body healthy, I feel so much better. I feel better physically, but I also mentally feel like none of the crappy thoughts that we all have about ourselves on an ongoing basis, those calm down. My confidence goes up. I feel calm and strong, and I feel, like I can take on anything. And that's, that combination is really, really important to be aware of. Like a lot of people go to the gym and they think like, I'm going to ride the bike forever. I'm going to go for a run. We actually need to lift heavy things.
Yeah.
And I'm doing a competition on Sunday.
Cool.
Super fun. And that's the other advantage, is the community that comes with exercise, right? Whether it's just, just for fun. I'm at this point where I'm just like, fuck it, fuck all of it. Like, I just want to do whatever I want to do. And Diana, I've gotten 4 tattoos in the last 2 months.
Yes, I know this, my friend, and welcome to the club.
But it's incredibly liberating.
Yeah.
But like if I want to go and try slacklining, I'm just gonna go and do it, because it can be fun.
Yeah.
And so the movement of your body and knowing how much cardio you need and how much strength training you need is super important, and it doesn't have to be intense.
Yeah. And when we're looking actually specifically at women, perimenopausal and postmenopausal, too much exercise is a stress on the body, and stress will accelerate some of the symptoms we're talking about. So it's not actually recommended to have high cardio sessions in perimenopause and menopause. I mean, there are people that have been doing it their whole lives. My sister ran 45 minutes every day most of her life, and recently had a fall, broke her finger, her scapula, and injured her knee doing a stress test because she was having cardiac symptoms. So like, I just said to her, meditate, do some yoga, go walking, slow it down a little bit. Your body's giving you some signals to slow down. So, but strength training is really essential. And, it could be a lot. It just has to be more than what you've done.
And now, like, we're talking to a community of people here locally that are insane. So, them aside, the moderation and the, I am such a fan of I lead another podcast called How to Founder with my 2 co-hosts, and almost every episode, and this is all about, being a founder of a business, and almost every episode comes back to how important it is to have self-awareness.
Yeah.
Self-awareness for us is incredibly important, but awareness of your body. Like, can you become so curious about your body? I do not want to leave it to anyone else to try and understand my body. I'm wearing this continuous glucose monitor now because I've been diagnosed with diabetes, and it's giving me all this data about myself. And all of a sudden, there it is, in like no guessing. I know exactly what's happening inside one part of my body. I wear this guy because it gives me all my biometrics about everything. And now I am a student of my body. I am so intimately familiar with it. And I think most people in the medical community don't expect that. And so they
don't necessarily even practice it, to be honest, Steph. Like, I have one friend who's a medical practitioner here in town. She's a physician, and she's the only physician I've ever met that actually walks the talk and understands what it feels like to have a somatic experience with your body. Because, I'm a somatic coach as well. So this connecting to the body, which I didn't do till I was like 40, till I started doing yoga, I was not really connected to my body. I lived really, really successfully here and forgot that there was this whole other part of me that was constantly communicating with me, and I was not listening. So it is important. Listen to your body.
Mm-hmm. What else you got on your list? Because I've got a couple of other things too.
Yeah, I think long-term complications because of the loss of estrogen, which is what happens when we go through perimenopause and menopause, is cardiovascular disease. We've already talked about the potential long-term effects of urinary incontinence. And then I think one of the scariest things is that lack of understanding. And so I really want, if healthcare professionals are listening to this, share this podcast in your workplace with other healthcare professionals so that they have a better understanding. Women need to be heard. They need to be understood. We need to trust what they're telling us about their bodies. And then we need to get curious and help to troubleshoot with them. They're part of the conversation. They cannot go to a doctor who says, do this, take this, and then see you later in a year. There needs to be more ongoing support, conversation, and women need to advocate.
But you can also collect your own data, right? Like I bought a hormonal health hormone monitor, and I bought this glucose monitor, and I've got my biometrics, and I've got you can get all sorts of different things. Collect your own data, get to know your own body, and then you're better informed, and you can go to your health. Don't assume but you've got.
Also, don't assume they know. Don't assume they know. It might be a education opportunity. If you have the opportunity to see a naturopath, they tend to be a little more knowledgeable in women's health. So
they look at things holistically, right?
Yeah, and they look holistically. Yeah. What else is on your list, Steph?
So, beyond perimenopause and menopause and the physical things that happen to our body, I would say one of the big scary things for people in the middle ages is loneliness. And we've talked before about our kids leaving the nest. This has become really sort of front and center for me as I've got my kid and graduating this year. And, we went traveling for 2 weeks together. And all of a sudden I realized that she's going to be out in the world on her own. And she's going to have to learn how to cope and handle with things, but I'm going to be by myself.
Yeah.
And I don't have a spouse. And I have lots of friends and people who are close to me and that sort of thing. But I think loneliness is something that even if you do have a spouse, when your kids go or your friends start to go, loneliness is a huge, scary thing for people in our age group, especially if you're not naturally a very extroverted social person who struggles with, the social side of things. So I think that that's one of the big scary truths about getting into this age.
Yeah. And I think sometimes, I'm with you, that, right? I'm empty nester as of this year. And it's been an adjustment. And most of the time I'm really good with it because I have such a vibrant community. But then being sick for a week and having so much rain and no pickleball and no line dancing because we had this strike. And I said to you earlier, I'm really feeling the effects of not being with my intimate friends, not having those deep conversations, those fun connections, because it's not just all about conversation. We just have fun together. We laugh together. We move together. And so Steph and I are going to commit to getting together tomorrow. But I think one of the dangers as well that's really scary is once the kids leave, if you are in a relationship living with someone with a partner, and then you realize you've spent so many years with both of you focused on the kids and your work that you don't even know each other anymore and maybe don't even like each other anymore. And I think that's a really scary truth of this time of year. And it's not surprising that a lot of women choose to separate and divorce at this time because they realize they don't know their partner. They haven't been happy in the relationship. They may want to try, he may want to try, but the other partner doesn't want to. And it takes two people to really put the effort in. And I think that's just a really scary truth. And we've talked about in previous podcast episodes, ways to find your playgrounds, ways to find your community. So go back and listen to podcasts 2 and 3, because we talk a lot about that.
Yeah. And I come from a slightly different perspective on relationships. And I actually don't believe we're meant to be with one person our entire lives. Like, I just don't think that's natural, except the social conditioning tells us that we have to be. And, imagine going out in the world after being married for 35 years and going, oh my gosh, how do I navigate this? I would say I was a serial monogamist in the early part of my life. And I remember the day that I ended a relationship and I had committed to myself to be single for a year, because I knew I was getting into this pattern of dependency from one person to the next, to the next, to the next. And I had identified myself around who I was with. And I knew logically that was a really difficult place to be in. And I was going to create a condition I didn't want to be in. And I remember so clearly this night that I went out with all of my friends. And this was the first night that I was single. And I knew I had this commitment to myself. And I remember sitting there looking around at all these people having fun together and then leaving. And I was standing there by myself going, this is horrible. Like, this is so lonely. But it was one of the best things I ever did for myself.
Yes.
So that feeling of fear of being on your own, I will say, like, I think about it a lot in terms of being aging and on my own. And on the one hand, I'm so used to it and I'm totally comfortable with it. But on the other hand, I'm like, wouldn't it be nice to spend those years in companionship with somebody? And so, there's a struggle there for sure, back and forth. Kind of related is another big scary thing that I think we all are sort of contending with is loss. Now is the time that people are starting to get sick. We have aging parents, and we are. I know in my family that we are facing the potential of quite a few losses coming up very shortly, all at the same time. Also, my technically husband has been in the hospital for 4 weeks now, and he's got stage 3 cancer. And the great news is that he finally had a surgery and they've declared him cancer free, but now he's got complications, and he's going to be okay. He's going to be fine. But for the last year, we've been contending with all of this while he goes through treatments. And of course, it brings up topics around mortality and all that sort of thing. And so I think the concept of loss is starting to become very, very close to home. And as we're aging, it's just natural that we're going to start dealing with illnesses and and people aging out and all of that sort of thing. So I think loss is a really, really big, scary truth that sort of hits you all at once.
Yeah.
I do think that there was one point in my life, maybe last year, where I went, oh my God, all of this is coming very soon.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. We call that in the stress world, the domain of stress that's related to is called prosocial stress. So there's stresses that are happening around us, not within us, but it has such a big impact on us. So the reality of aging parents, aging friends, communities getting smaller. I play pickleball with women. A lot of them are in their early 70s, and they're starting to have funerals to attend. And I know that in not too far distance, that's going to be me attending funerals of other people, or maybe of them. And so that is a really big, a big piece of it. And it probably ties very much into feelings of, have I done what I want to do with my life, and feelings of immortality, and then feelings of potential further loneliness and mental health difficulties. So what's the medicine of all this stuff? What's the medicine?
Yeah. What's the reframe? For me, death is not something that I fear. Like, I don't think about it and get scared, but I also know it's going to be really heavy because it's going to get closer and closer to home. I think that, if I was dealing with the loss of my kids, I think that would really, really destroy me. But I think that I just, I know the inevitability of loss, and I know that, it's going to happen. And I tend to be like pretty grounded about it, but I also do think it's a very scary thing for people. So the reframe here is not to be glib about it and be like, oh, everybody dies, right? But I do think, like, this is where Buddhist principles and Buddhist learning, I think, has a really beautiful outlook on death and aging and loss. And I think that if we can summarize some of those teachings, and I know you can probably do this better than me, I think there's a really, really lovely way of looking at it.
Yeah. Yeah. My son is actually taking a course in university called Death and Dying. And he's studying Taoism, and he's studying Buddhism, and he's studying their experience of death and the inevitability and the impermanence of life. And sort of he's navigating this on his own. And we have a lot of conversations about it. Plus, I get to read all of his assignments. And his perspective is very similar to mine, that death, my perspective is, and I don't want to impose this on anybody, but the inevitability of death for me is simply a reminder to live as joyfully and fully as I can, because we never know. We just don't know.
Yeah. And so, that's how we how we reflect on it and adjust our own lives, but also in the context of the people that we love that are, I think one of the big things that has been really stood out for me with dealing with my husband being sick is the loss of control that I have. Like, I can't do anything about his outcome. I cannot influence it at all. All I can do is support him and be able to support my kids in how they're processing. But when we think about the death of somebody that we love, we obviously immediately think about loss. And so what do I do with that, right? What do I do with something not being in my life anymore that was? Well, we grieve, right? We're going to have grief. We're going to have to process this in our own contexts. And I think it comes back to the same thing we talked about earlier in the show, that the understanding that this will not be how it feels forever. And if we have I don't know that we can call it a luxury, but if we have the ability to know that something is coming, that gives us the ability to do all the things we want to honor somebody and prepare for them to continue to be honored in our lives. If it's a sudden loss, that's a little bit harder, but I think part of that is being able to really understand the person. And I from what I understand, people who are dying, one of the most wonderful things that they can have is to feel known, is to feel like there was some legacy and feel like they had contributed. And I think giving people that ability to tell their stories is such a beautiful thing when they know that that's their inevitability.
Yeah. You know that I've gone through a lot of grief in my life, and I've got a whole chapter in my book just on grief. And one of the ways that I love to reflect on grief and loss is grief is simply love transformed. And knowing that it's okay to grieve, it's part of the journey. And my parents passed 10 years apart from each other. My mom was long-term cancer. My dad was very sudden and unexpected. I would say my dad's passing probably impacted me the most because I wasn't prepared for it, whereas my mom's, I had 6 months to prepare for it. And
Yeah.
so, everyone's going to process grief differently, but grief needs to be brought closer. Grief needs to be experienced and expressed and honored as part of the journey of just the transitions of life. And I'm with you, death is not something that scares me. Losing people doesn't actually scare me either. I would even say with my kids, like, I feel like I have such a strong spiritual understanding of life and death and what happens beyond that I trust fully, but I won't know until I get there. I will say my dad's passing, being so unexpected, was really like jarring for me and catapulted me into doing a lot more deep work on grief that I had been holding inside that I hadn't even realized. So I get it. This is a time of life that is a possibility.
Yeah, and we touched on this in an earlier episode, but we have to feel things, and we have to let ourselves feel things, and we have to feel grief. We have to feel loss. We have to feel sad. We have to go through all of the elements of that. And it's never, going into it knowing this is the only way is through, right? Like, nothing's going to change the circumstances, but we can manage our own journeys through it. I know we're over time, but my very last piece that I think is a big scary truth about the Middle Ages is that it's so important for us to define our identity at this age. And when we go through all the things that happen seemingly all at once, it feels like we really slip away from our identity and knowing ourselves. And that loss of identity, or I don't even think it's a loss of identity. I think it's a recognition that with all the other distractions we had in our child rearing years or whatever, that we end up coming back to ourselves and being alone with ourselves. all of a sudden we feel like we have not honored ourselves. We don't know ourselves. We've defined ourselves in the context of all these other things. And now it's very scary to confront ourselves as whole human beings and start to honor what we want, because we've never learned how to do that. And I think getting, there's so much tendency to move to distractions. And it's really scary to confront yourself.
Yeah, we talked about this in episode 1, so you can go back and have a listen. But I think we should put a pin in it, Steph, and then pick this up next time where, what does it mean to redefine who you are and to call back home all parts of you? And because we're at Halloween and we're in that veil of physical and spiritual being really, really close, and the scary things that we don't necessarily want to look at in our lives, let's call them our shadows, the disowned parts of ourselves. Why don't we pick up that scary confrontation in our chat next week?
Yeah, I'd love to have an episode around identity. I think it's a really important topic, and I think it's something that confronts everyone at this age, and probably something we can talk through from a non-professional perspective.
Yeah.
All right. If anything, today is the day to drop your identity and go out in costume and celebrate being something entirely else. I hate dressing up. I am not going to do that. But for the rest of you, go have fun being a new person or a different person, even just for a little while. I'm having fun with these borders. And then next week we'll pick it back up and we will dive into what happens when you get confronted with a loss of identity.
Yeah.
All right.
Fantastic. What a great episode. I feel like we covered so much today that I've been wanting to cover. So well done, my friend, bringing it all out. And I hope it was very helpful for those of you listening. As always, send us a comment if something resonated with you, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Rose. Happy Halloween to you too.
Yes, happy Halloween. And thanks for joining us in the Middle Ages.
All right.
Thanks for listening to The Middle Ages. If you loved this episode, follow the show, leave a review, and share it with someone who's rewriting the rules of midlife too. Because around here, we believe midlife isn't the end of anything. It's the start of everything. See you next time.